Here we will continue the course for EPA 608, this universal certificate, and we are studying now type 1. This is for the small appliances and for the appliances that until up to 5 pounds of refrigerant. In this video we will continue this for type 1 servicing, and we will continue safety. Let's start with servicing.
In this module, we will take a look at the requirements for the equipment we use in servicing Type 1 appliances. We will discuss recovery devices, process tubes, vacuum pumps, and charging cylinders.
Recovery devices are used to evacuate refrigerant from an appliance and store it in a recovery cylinder. They do the work of evacuating the refrigerant from the appliance, but are not used for holding the refrigerant. Earlier, we talked about how recovery devices can be used in active or self-contained recovery. Recovery devices need to be tested to ensure they meet EPA requirements. The EPA approves 2 organizations to certify recycling and recovery equipment: AHRI, the Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute, and UL, Underwriters Laboratories. AHRI Standard 740 describes the requirements that recovery equipment must fulfill. Recovery devices are tested according to this standard at EPA-approved laboratories. If equipment is properly certified, you will see a label on it that states, "This equipment has been certified by AHRI or UL to meet EPA's minimum requirements for recycling and or recovery equipment intended for use with appropriate category of appliance."
All recovery devices need to be tested at place called AHR standard 740. It must be approved from AHRI. No, this standard is guidance. Recovery devices are tested and certified by both AHRII and UL.
Recovery devices used with small appliances must be able to achieve either a 4-inch vacuum per AHRI 740 or recover a required percentage of refrigerant. That means if the recovery device cannot achieve a 4-inch vacuum per AHRI 740, it must recover 90% of refrigerant in systems with a working compressor and recover 80% of refrigerant in systems with a non-operational compressor.
If a recovery device cannot achieve a 4-inch vacuum, which one of the following does it need to have to be able to do in order to be used with the type 1 this small appliances? Select all apply. Recover 80% of refrigerant with working compressor, 80% of refrigerant of non-working compressor. Recover 90% of refrigerant working compressor and 80% not working. Correct. Recovery device has to achieve 4-inch vacuum inch in all circumstances. Not in all circumstances.
Service apertures or process stubs make it easier for technicians to access refrigerant when they need to recover or recharge the device. All appliances containing ozone-depleting substances, ODS, and their non-exempt substitutes must have a service aperture or process stub. In small appliances, the process stub used to access the appliance's refrigerant looks like a straight piece of tubing. It must be used alongside a piercing access valve.
What does the process stub look like in small appliances? Straight piece of tubing, straight piece of wiring, a round piece of tubing, process stub, straight piece of tubing. Yeah.
The process stub makes it possible to use a piercing access valve to service an appliance. Large equipment does not need this stub because they are generally manufactured with access ports. Vacuum pumps are used to remove air and non-condensables from the appliance after the refrigerant in the appliance has been recovered. They then vent the air and non-condensables into the atmosphere. Air and non-condensables are not subject to the venting prohibition, only refrigerants, which is why they can safely be vented. Vacuum pumps are not designed to work with pressurized systems or containers, and cannot be used as recovery devices.
Vacuum pump can be used as recover refrigerant, release refrigerant into the atmosphere, both A and B, remove air and other non-condensable, remove air.
A charging cylinder is a refrigerant cylinder that is used to charge refrigerant into small systems containing a few pounds of refrigerant. You have to refill these cylinders with refrigerant before you can use them to charge small systems. They're a little like the portable gas canisters you have in your vehicle that you fill with spare gas. These cylinders were typically used to contain R12, R22 and other older refrigerants. The marks provided on the cylinders correspond to the volume of specific refrigerants they can contain. This means you would have to get a separate charging cylinder for each refrigerant. When refilling a charging cylinder using ozone-depleting substances, any refrigerant that is vented off the top is subject to the venting prohibition and needs to be recovered.
The refrigerant vented off the top of charging cylinder need to be recovered if it is an ozone-depleting substances like HCFC and HFC, a non-exempt substitute, all of the above.
Charging cylinders are rarely seen on the field anymore because they have been replaced with digital scales, which are more portable, more accurate, and more universal. In this module, we learned about different pieces of equipment used in our services as HVAC technicians. Remember that recovery devices need to be certified by EPA-approved organizations like AHRI and UL. Also, remember that the process stub for small appliances looks like a straight piece of tubing. Vacuum pumps cannot be used to recover refrigerants, and any ODS and non-exempt substitutes must be recovered to avoid violating the venting prohibition.
We'll continue.
In this module,
Diagnosing
we will take a
issues.
look at the maintenance guidelines and some of the common issues we have to deal with when servicing small appliances. Practicing technicians need to check recovery equipment for refrigerant leaks on a regular basis.
The earlier we catch a leak, the easier it is to repair the recovery equipment. We don't want to find out mid-recovery that our recovery device is leaking. A leaking recovery device can vent refrigerants into the atmosphere and may also lead to dangerous scenarios when handling flammable or toxic refrigerant. To prevent these issues, technicians should regularly check recovery devices for leaks.
What piece of equipment should we check regularly for leak? Recovery device, recovery vacuum pump, access fittings, all of these. Access fittings. No? All. We need to check a recovery device regularly for leak recovery device because it's the highest probability of venting refrigerant.
For small appliances that are leaking, the EPA does not technically require us to repair the leak. But the EPA recommends to repair it whenever possible. Financially, it also makes sense to repair any leaks we find. Repairing leaks while they're still small prolongs the life of the equipment. Furthermore, smaller leaks are always easier to fix than big ones.
Which of the following statements is true for small appliance? The EPA required repair of all leak above 80% of leak rate. The EPA doesn't require repair of leaking small appliances. The AHRI standard 740 require repair leaks. You should not repair a leak in small appliances. Okay, HR standard. The EPA required leak. The EPA doesn't require technique to repair leak on
The
small appliances.
requirements for
Oh,
small appliances are not as stringent because
no,
the amount of
they will
refrigerant is
change.
under 5 pounds, by definition. Most refrigerants used in household refrigerators, especially new ones, are generally non-toxic. For example, newer household refrigerators contain about 1/3 of a pound of hydrocarbon refrigerants, which are non-toxic. Compare this to the 50+ pounds of such refrigerant in commercial appliances. Additionally, if the appliance is still working normally, it typically means that the leak is minimal. However, if the appliance is not working and we find that the system pressure is 0 psig, it indicates the presence of a leak in the system as well as the complete loss of refrigerant from the system.
When the system pressure is found to be 0, what does this indicate? This indicates that there has been leak, yeah, and there is minimum more refrigerant left in the appliance, yeah. We can't recover refrigerant, yeah. It's all correct.
A compressor burnout
Yeah.
occurs when the motor of the compressor fails catastrophically. In sealed systems, a pungent smell usually indicates a compressor burnout.
Which of the following indicate compressor burnout in sealed system? Pungent smell, pungent sweet smell, a pungent taste, pungent
When a compressor burns
smell.
out, it produces a highly acidic oil. Most of this oil will remain in the compressor, but some of it may make it to the refrigerant piping and other components of the system. In the event of a suspected compressor burnout, we should first recover any refrigerant in the system in a separate recovery container. Since it might be contaminated, it is advisable to use a cylinder that isn't used for any other purpose. Afterward, look for signs of contamination in the oil, which may include discolored oil and an acidic smell. If we see these signs of contamination, the entire system needs to be flushed because the oil could be present in other components. Flushing the system will clean out any contaminants from the system components.
What are signs of contamination? Discolored oil, acid smell, both acidic smell. If the oil contaminated, what do we have to do? Flush the system.
Non-condensables are gases that do not condense, turn from vapor to liquid, at the operating temperatures of the system. Examples of non-condensables are water vapor and nitrogen. The presence of non-condensables in the refrigerant changes its properties. It makes the system less efficient at cooling and increases the pressure within it. If there is a high quantity of non-condensables in the system, this shows up as increased pressure on the high side of an active recovery device. So, if you get abnormally high pressure readings from the high side of an active recovery device, it may be indicative of the presence of non-condensables in the refrigerant.
Non-condensables would blank the pressure on the high side of an active recovery, would increase.
Taking
Okay,
pressure readings allows us to
yeah.
determine whether there are non-condensables present. We can check what the refrigerant's pressure should be at a given temperature by looking at the refrigerant's PT chart. If the pressure reading is off by a lot, then we know there are non-condensables present. To remove non-condensables, we can use filter dryers, which are components that trap contaminants such as acids, wax, and moisture using desiccants, or flush the system using a vacuum pump to get rid of non-condensables.
Which of the following would remove non-condensables from the system? Filter dryer? Yeah, flushing
In
the
this
system
module, we discuss the importance of checking
and
recovery
filter dryer.
devices regularly to prevent venting. We also covered leak repair requirements, signs of compressor burnout, and the effects of non-condensables. Next, we'll have a look at safety issues.
Let's finish servicing quiz at first. Okay, after this we'll go to safety. This 15 question. If a recovery device cannot achieve a 4-inch vacuum, which one of the following does it have to be able to do in order to be used with type 1 small appliances? Select. Okay, it's recover 80% refrigerant with working. No, it's 90 with working and 80 with non-working. If an oil is contaminated, what do we have to do? Flush the system. Non-condensable would increase the pressure on the high side. Recovery devices are tested and certified by both HRI and UL. Refrigerant vented the refrigerant vented off the top of charging cylinder not to be recovered if it is and ozone depleting substances like HFC and HFC. Non-examples are all. Vacuum pump can be used to vacuum pump can be used to recover refrigerant, remove air from other non-condensable, release refrigerant into the atmosphere, remove air. What are the signs of fragrant contamination? Discolored oil and acidic smell. Pause. What does the process stub look like in small appliances? Straight pieces of tubing. What piece of equipment should we check regularly? We should recovery device, recovery vacuum pump, recovery device. I don't remember this one, but I think this one. When the system pressure found is to be 0 psi, what does this indicate? There has been leakage, there is a minimum of refrigerant left, we cannot recover refrigerant, all of this. Which of the following indicates a compressor burnout in a sealed system? Pungent smell. Which of the following statement is true for small appliances? The EPA require repair of all leak above 80% of leak. The EPA doesn't require repair of leaking small appliances. Yeah. Which of the following would remove non-condensable? Which of the following would remove non-condensable from the system? Filter dryer, flushing system, both. A recovery device has to achieve a 4-inch vacuum in all circumstances. No. All recovery devices need to be tested at a place called HR standard. No, they will not call tested in standard. They could tested in HRI as an institute. Okay. Now we have 10 of 10. We answered all the question correctly. Let's go to the next one. The next and last one in type 1. It is the safety.
In this module, we will take a look at the safety equipment and practices that will help us avoid injury or harm. We will also discuss why we should never expose refrigerants to high temperatures.
As technicians, it is important to handle refrigerants carefully because they can be flammable, toxic, or both. Remember, refrigerants are also stored in pressurized cylinders, so there is always a risk of explosion. In an earlier module, we learned that the number one cause of refrigerant-related deaths in the HVAC industry is oxygen deprivation. We can prevent this by following the recommended safety protocols in the event of refrigerant leaks.
What is the number one cause of refrigerant related death in HVAC industry? Heart attack, refrigerant toxicity, overload. Okay, oxygen.
Working
Oxygen
with
depression.
refrigerants requires that we use
Oxygen.
safety eyewear and butyl-lined gloves. We need to wear both of these items of protective gear when connecting or disconnecting hoses, because that's when we're most likely to come into contact with refrigerant.
Which of the following is needed to protect your hands from the refrigerant burners? Cotton gloves, butyl-lined gloves. Yeah. When do we need to use safety eyewear and butyl-lined gloves? When testing the quality of refrigerant, when moving refrigerant cylinder, when connecting and disconnected hosing, when turning the refrigerant scale, when testing the oh okay, when connected and disconnected hoses. Yeah,
Safety eyewear protects our
okay,
eyes
so
from
we
potentially
will
toxic
use it
chemicals,
when
and butyl-lined
disconnect
gloves prevents refrigerant
hose.
burns or frostbite. Note that regular cloth gloves are not enough protection against refrigerant burns and frostbite. Always ensure your gloves are lined with butyl. A self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA, is used to provide air that is safe to breathe in spaces with a toxically contaminated or oxygen-deprived air supply. If you know that refrigerant has leaked, you must locate a SCBA and put it on immediately. If no SCBA can be located, you need to leave the space and ventilate it. SCBAs are needed when there is a leak, but not for regular servicing. When using nitrogen in our repairs, we must ensure that the nitrogen tank has a regulator or relief valve. This is to guard against a sudden pressure buildup that can lead to an explosion.
What piece of equipment is needed on nitrogen tank when using them to service an appliances? Pressure regulator.
Lastly, we need to go over the use of safety markings with hydrocarbon refrigerants. Remember, hydrocarbons are highly flammable refrigerants. Safety markings help to reduce the risk of accidentally igniting highly flammable HC refrigerants. SNAP regulations require markings on equipment that contain hydrocarbon refrigerants. These markings are part of the use conditions for hydrocarbons in household refrigerators under SNAP. Appliance manufacturers are responsible for putting the safety markings in place to help technicians identify the risk. When hydrocarbons are used in appliances, these areas need to be permanently marked. On or near any evaporators, near any exposed refrigerant tubing, near the machine compartment, and on the exterior of the refrigerator.
Which of the following are areas that do not need to be marked when it comes with appliances that contain HCF? Outside the refrigerant, evaporator, exposed tubing, inside the refrigerant, inside the refrigerant door, outside refrigerant, I think. No? It must be marked. Okay. Tubing. Permanent marking are needed in all of the areas except for inside the refrigerant door. Safety marking used in appliances with hydrocarbon refrigerant are applied by technician to or another technician, permanently made on the equipment during manufacture, have to be put on the equipment permanently by
A very
technician. No,
large leak can cause suffocation because refrigerants
permanent
are
by the
heavier
factory.
than air and displace oxygen. This cuts off the oxygen supply at ground level, which can cause suffocation. The size of the space that the equipment is in affects the concentration of refrigerant in the air. For example, if the space is small, the amount of refrigerant fills up the room faster and reaches a higher concentration if a leak occurs. If you detect a refrigerant leak, do not try to stop it. The most important thing to do is to preserve your own life. You must first find and put on a SCBA. If no SCBA is available, then you must naturally ventilate the area to prevent an explosion. This may include opening any windows or doors to decrease the concentration of refrigerant in the air.
If refrigerant has been released, what is the first thing you should do? Locate and exit. Locate a self-contained pressing approach. Locate specially contained pressing apparatus. Locate the leak to stop the fill of dangerous refrigerant. Locate specially contained. Oh no, need self-contained. Okay. If we cannot find SCBA, what should we do? Vacate the area.
We talked
All
about how
of
refrigerants are stored in pressurized cylinders. If subjected to high temperatures, these cylinders can explode, causing the refrigerant inside to decompose into toxic substances. This is why we should never let refrigerants come into contact with open flames or hot metal surfaces. At high temperatures, CFC and HCFC refrigerants decompose to hydrochloric acids and hydrofluoric acids. These acids can cause severe burns and can be fatal within hours. This is why we need to take care not to expose CFC and HCFC refrigerants to high temperatures. If a refrigerant contains chlorine, it will decompose to hydrochloric acids. If a refrigerant contains fluorine, it will decompose to hydrofluoric acids.
at high temperature, what does CFC and HCFC decompose to? Hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid, hydrocarbon and hydrofluorocarbon, chloric and fluoric acid. I think no. Hydraulic and hydrochloric acid.
CFCs and
Yeah.
HCFCs are not flammable, but they can burn in the presence of a flame. When we use welding torches to cut refrigerant piping, what happens is we actually burn the piping. There can be residual refrigerant in the piping that burns along with it. If this burning residue turns out to be CFC or HCFC refrigerant, it will decompose to produce phosgene gas. Phosgene gas is lethally poisonous. In fact, phosgene gas was previously used as a chemical weapon in World War I. This is why it is strongly suggested to avoid burning or heating up CFC and HCFC refrigerants.
Burning CFC and HCFC can create toxic vapor that are harmful to inhale, will produce vascular gas, result from cutting welding piping containing residue. Yeah, it will be reduced.
In this
All
module,
of
we
these.
discuss the safety equipment we need to prevent refrigerant burns and handle refrigerant leaks. We also went over the dangerous chemicals that CFCs and HCFCs can produce if exposed to heat. We've learned the dangerous reasons why we cannot expose refrigerants to open flames or high temperatures.
Okay, let's take the safety quiz, and after this we will finish all type 1 and we will start in type 2. 10 question. At high temperature, what do CFCs and HCFCs decompose to? Hydrochloric and hydrofluoric acid. Burning CFC and HCFC and create toxic vapors that are harmful to inhale, will produce phosphogen gas. Okay, result from cutting or welding pipes containing residual refrigerant. Okay, if a refrigerant has been released, what is the first thing you should do? Locate self-containing breathing approaches. If we cannot find self-containing breathing approaches, what we should do? Locate exit, exits area, ventilates area. Yeah. Safety marking using the appliances with hydrocarbon refrigerant are applied by technician. No. Permanently made. Yeah. Have to be put on the equipment permanently by technician. Applied by the technician to warn. We have. Okay. What is the number? It's all of above. What is the number one use of refrigerant related deaths in the HVAC industry? Heart attack, refrigerant toxicity, fires, oxygen deprivation. What piece of equipment is needed on a nitrogen tank when using them to service an appliances? Refrigerant thermometer, pressure regulator, manual gauge, all of above. What piece of equipment needed on nitrogen tank? We need pressure regulator, nitrogen tank. When do we need to use safety eyewear and put well-lined gloves when testing the quality of refrigerant, when moving refrigerant, when connecting and disconnected hosing? Yeah. Which of the following are areas that do not need to be marked when it's come to the appliances that contain HFC inside the refrigerator door, but outside the refrigerator and the evaporator and exposed tubing all will be marked? Which of the following is needed to protect your hands from refrigerant burns? Cotton gloves. Your hands is put well-lined gloves. Let's check our questions. We answered all. Let's submit. Okay, our score is 8 from 10. Number 2, burning CFC and HCFC can make all the statement create toxic vapor that are harmful, will produce phosphogen gas, result from cutting or welding. Okay. Safety marking used in the appliances with hydrocarbon refrigerant are applied by technician, permanently made, have to be put on the equipment permanently by technician, by manufacturer. Okay, this is by manufacturer. So now we finished servicing and safety. So now we finished this type 1. The next video we will start in type 2.